Well, welcome sports fans and all you in particular Patriot fans out there who've been tuning in to the In the Huddle show. You know we've taken a bit of a vacation here the last several weeks. I had a trip that I made out to my home state of Oregon to visit family out there, and with some of the other scheduling conflicts we've had, we haven't been able to do. But I'm glad that at least we're through all of that and back in touch with all you guys. We've got a real treat for you today. But before we get started, and you'll probably recognize him, but today's episode of In the Huddle with Randy Vataha is brought to you by Mark Cruz and family. Over the years, Mark has supported Patriots alumni with mentoring and advice, and along with his family, has participated in all of our events and programs. And somehow the script gave it away, Randy, that you're joining us here today. So welcome to In the Huddle with you.
My pleasure. It's such a great association to be hooked up with the Patriots. In the early days, we go back to I played the first home regular season game in what was then Schaefer Stadium. Some pretty lean times on the football field, but great for the franchise to have its own stadium, and then obviously through the unprecedented success the team's had over the last 18, 19, 20 years. It's just been great. So I'll always enjoy talking about the Pats.
So it was was it your rookie year that you played at Schaefer Stadium, the first
Yep.
game at Schaefer? That was your rookie year.
That was my rookie year. I was actually drafted back then in the 17th round. Now they only have 7 rounds, but I was drafted in the 17th round by the LA Rams, and ended up getting released the week before the last preseason game. And Upton Bell, the then general manager, talked to Plunkett, and the week that I was released, the Rams played the Patriots. And my coach with the Rams, the receiver coach, was Dick Vermeil, who interestingly was the guy that actually recruited me to Stanford. So after he recruited me to Stanford, after that, when Tom Prothro became the head coach of the Rams, he was the receiver coach. And when I ended up being drafted by the Rams, he was my coach there. And he put in a good word for me as well, along with Plunkett and the coach. And so I got a shot for one preseason game and ended up playing in the first game, and the first home game. I missed the Giants debacle in the preseason, where people were getting home the next day. But,
and the toilets overflowing and all of those historical events.
I said it was kind of funny. My last college game I played in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, 105,000 people. And then, here I am in the NFL, and I came into Schaefer Stadium, and the toilets weren't even on the walls yet, but we played. So
right. a bit of a difference, huh? A bit of a culture shock from going from one to the other. Now, were you and Plunkett the same graduating class at Stanford? Was he a year ahead of you?
He was actually a year ahead of me, but redshirted his freshman year. He had actually had a health issue that they weren't sure if he was going to be able to play at all. So his freshman year, he sat out, and all of that came out fine, thank God, and was ready to go, and started as a sophomore after he redshirted. Then he had his first freshman year, then started as a sophomore, and sophomore, junior, senior, set all the records, won the Heisman Trophy, first pick in the NFL draft.
To the Patriots, by the way.
Everybody
knows that. Well, as long as we're talking recruiting stories, I'll have you know that I grew up in Oregon, so on the coast, and is the old Pac-8. And growing up in Oregon, I got recruited by Stanford. In fact, Roger Theater was my recruiter.
Is that right?
Yeah, he was I think he was your receiver coach.
Receiver coach, yeah.
And anyway, and that was, 70. That was following the 71 season. 72, I was a freshman. So 71 season was following. That was the Rose Bowl that you're talking about. And I remember John Ralston calling me from the locker room at the Rose Bowl after the game and asked if I watched. He probably had a list of 50 guys that he called, but I was on that list. And I remember watching the game. I came down and watched your game in Corvallis at Oregon when you played Oregon State that season. And I remember going into your locker room, being introduced to the Thunder Chickens. That was the defensive line with
the defensive line.
Yeah, with those guys. So that was
a great story about the Thunder Chickens. That was the nickname, obviously. Well, typical Stanford. Everything's a bit of mocking the establishment. But when Stanford was making the change, it was when I played there, it was the Stanford Indians.
Right.
And they had a referendum on campus to see what the students wanted to change the name to. And there was never an official announcement of what name won, but the unofficial people that were counting ballots all let it get out that the Thunder Chickens won the name. But of course they didn't do that. They, to be politically correct, just went with cardinal, not the bird, but the color.
Right.
So, it's hard to offend a color. So, but the Thunder Chickens were on everybody's mind. That was just a year or two after that they changed the name from Indians to Cardinal.
Right. Oh, that's funny. In fact, it was the only reason I didn't make a campus trip to Stanford is because they wanted a $100 deposit to bring you down there that was non-refundable. I didn't have $100, so I ended up going to Colorado. How about that?
There you go. Oh, that's funny.
So the world shrinks. I'm telling you that the Pac-8 recruiting. And even back then, you had John Ralston at Stanford, John McKay at USC, you had DeAndros at Oregon State, you had University of Washington, Don Owen at University of Washington. Yeah. There was just kind of a really tight knit group. You knew the schools and you knew who the coaches were going to be each and every year. Unlike seeing the march and parade of coaches in and out of these college campuses today.
Yeah, it's a big business now. I mean, it was a business then, but nothing like it is now.
Right.
So,
right.
All right.
Well, and so you come to the Patriots, and 70, it would have been 72 was your.
71 was my rookie.
Was your rookie year? Okay.
My senior season was the 70 season.
Got
the
it.
Rose Bowl's January 1st, so
Yep.
It was the 71 Rose Bowl.
All right. No wonder I get confused and
and that was the
get headaches.
Of the stadium. Yeah.
So anyway, your rookie year, you come up here, and it must have been, I don't know, not exactly eye-opening, but 17th round draft pick, and you're out there amongst some of the greatest, and then you became recognized as one of those kind of guys. It wasn't like you were a speed demon or had all the size in the world, because you had, you didn't. You had to overcome an awful lot of those things, but you were a terrific receiver, some that the quarterback could really count on being where he was supposed to be as a route runner.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Well, my draft story, I always get a kick out of. When I finished, and we won the Rose Bowl and all that, I wasn't thinking I'd be in the NFL or even have a shot. And of course, I knew Plunkett was pretty much going to be the first pick. But in those days, the draft was in January because there was no free agency, so they didn't have to worry. You basically owned the players in perpetuity. So they had the draft in January. So I was speaking at a high school banquet down in Southern California. I was out of school at that point for vacation, and I'm speaking at a high school banquet, and this woman walks up to the podium, and she's trying to talk to me, and I'm saying, "Geez, excuse me, but I'm trying to give a speech here." And she said, "Well, you've been drafted." Well, in 1971, being drafted.
You thought you were going to Vietnam or something.
That was a first plane to Vietnam. But then I finally realized she said in the NFL, and I couldn't believe it. And I asked her, "Well, excuse me, people, what round?" And she mumbled and finally told me the 17th round, which is the last round of the draft. So I finished my speech. I'm driving home, And I'm thinking, I can't wait to meet this. There's a brilliant football scout somewhere in that Rams organization. Can see through, no size, no speed, none of this, none of that. But this guy's got to be brilliant. I can't wait to meet him. So the next morning I get up and I get the LA Times, and I wanted to get the little, thing in the back that showed all the draft choices for, scrapbook. And on the cover of the sports page was Jack Youngblood, who was the first pick of Hall of Famer, and my picture as the last draft pick. And then they had the article underneath, and for Jack Youngblood, he was All-American 3 years in a row and won this award and that award, and everything you could possibly do. And mine was, the Rams had a tradition, and the tradition was the newest secretary in the office got to make the 17th pick. That's how important it was. And the writer that did it actually talked to her, and he said, well, why would you pick Randy Vataha? And it was because, played with Plunkett, pro offense. What would make you do that? And she goes, oh, I know nothing about football. That's one of the reasons they hired me. They wanted somebody to just focus on, being a good secretary. But I just like the name Vataha. So when people say there's nothing in a name, they're not always correct.
That's right.
That's how I got drafted.
That's right.
I was on the list.
Well, it was lean years for a little while with the Patriots up here when you came in. Chuck Fairbanks comes in and starts to turn things around. Talk about your relationship with Big Fair. Well,
the first interesting thing was, I went to junior college. I was high school. I was a 155-pound quarterback who couldn't pass. So after I told my coach to line up all of the college recruiters to come in, and not one showed up, I got the message. So I went to Golden West Junior College in Southern California and moved to wide receiver. And then I had a good year and made, All-State and all that stuff in California Junior College. And I had two teams recruit me. One was Stanford, John Ralston, who you mentioned. The other team was Oklahoma, Chuck Fairbanks.
Yeah, wow.
And Chuck came to my house, took my dad and my mom and me, and actually my wife, Debbie, is still here. It's our 50th wedding anniversary coming up. But took us all out to dinner, and when it was a very impressive program. They had won a number of national championships and all that. And there was Stanford. And, Stanford hadn't been to the Rose Bowl since 1952. This is 68, I'm sorry. And so anyway, at the end, I woke up one morning and said, well, that's just stupid. I'm going to Stanford, Jim Plunkett and da-da-da-da-da. And Oklahoma had a young quarterback, Jack Mildred, who ended up in the NFL, but as a defensive back, which tells you,
anyway, they ran the death out of that wishbone, and it had nothing to do with how good a thrower you were.
So. Oh, no, exactly. Yeah. He could wobble a few down once in a while because there was nobody in the defensive backfield. So anyway, when Chuck came in 73, and I remember kind of wondering how he would look at me. Here I was, turned him down to go to Oklahoma. And, now what's he going to do? But he was great. In my first year in 70, they had fired Cleve Rush, who was the coach. And there's 10 hours of stories about Cleve Rush. People have all heard him in Boston. But they had fired him and made John Major the temporary coach. And the team had only won one game the year before, and Plunkett and I came, and we had some other trades and stuff, and we actually went 6-8, and we beat Baltimore Colts in the last game of the year, who was the reigning Super Bowl champions. Right. And so they kept Major on. He started the next season and then got fired, and they had an interim coach finish out the season, Phil Bingston, and then Chuck came. Well, there was no real organization. There was no really good scouting. Things were turmoil. They'd hired Upton Bell my first year, and then they fired him in the second year, fired the coach. It was a lot of chaos. And Chuck came in, and I think his greatest strength was his organizational ability. He really he put the programs together, the practices. He was never afraid to hire top assistants. Some new coaches, they don't want to get outshined because this coach knows more about the NFL than he did. He went after every top guy he could get, and quickly turned that whole franchise around.
Right, right. No, and that's what I remember when I came in '76. A lot of things, but the one thing I always appreciated of Chuck Fairbanks is he coached the coaches, and he wasn't afraid to have the best. I mean, Red Miller was our line coach. Ron Earhart. I mean, they still run Ron Earhart's offense in the NFL when they line up in standard type of stuff. And Hank Bulla. You could just go down the list and some terrific coaches around him.
Oh yeah, Sam Rutigliano, if you remember Sam, and he was a real pro, and he really understood how to build an organization.
Yeah.
And in '73, I think we were 5-9. And then the next year, '74, we started out 6 wins, 7 losses. The team was really good, really good. And the first half, there was 14 games in those days, and we lost between offense and defense. We lost 21 starters out of 22.
Yeah.
To injury,
yeah.
And ended up 7-7 the end of the year. But the core was there, and then 75 is a whole different thing. That was the strike year. But then 76, we went 11-3, tied with Baltimore, and really should have won the Super Bowl that year.
Question.
I say that not kiddingly, because we beat Oakland pretty convincingly earlier in the year. We ended up the wild card team, tied with Baltimore, but I forget what the tiebreaker was. But we beat them at home, and they beat us at home, and there was some goofy tiebreaker. And then we opened with Oakland, and we had the game won. And we all believe won the game because Ray Hamilton, our middle nose tackle, blocked a pass on the goal line with just a few seconds left and landed on Kenny Stabler. And they called roughing the passer.
Right.
And the rules, like a punter, if you block the ball, the quarterback or the punter's fair game. I mean, you can't punch him or anything, but he could certainly land on him.
Right.
And that gave him the ball on the 6-inch line with 3 seconds left, and they just snuck it in to beat us. And then they went easily, weren't even challenged to winning the Super Bowl.
Right. Right. No, and I've had a conversation with Ben Dreith. I had the opportunity. He was the official that threw the hanky, and to have him spend 15 minutes defending that call was more than I could almost tolerate, because there was no way that should have impeded. In fact, that happened on 3rd and 13, and that was just a desperate throw by Stabler, who had receivers that could catch desperate passes, but that one sailed out of bounds because Ray hit it and hit him on the head on the way by, and first and goal.
Really a shame.
Yeah.
Really a shame. But anyway, Chuck had built that organization, and then of course they went to the playoffs again the next year, and this was long before salary caps and any of the mechanisms you have today to keep it competitively balanced. And I don't know all the facts, but I know we weren't one of the highest paid teams in the NFL by any means. So he did all of that within a reasonable budget by far. So
well, you know what I appreciated out of him when I arrived in '76 is he had older veterans and sprinkled in some of the youth. John Hanna and that draft class in '73 with Sam Cunningham, and Darryl Stingley was really terrific. Then '76 they drafted Mike Haynes and Tim Fox, and I happened to be in the middle of the two of them, so 2 out of 3 isn't bad. But we were joined by, I had Bill Inkaitis in front of me, who taught me to be a center. I had Bob McKay, who was a seventh year pro from Cleveland, come in, who kind of took me under his wing, and here's how to be a pro, not X's and O's, but here's how you're supposed to act as a pro.
Right.
and you had George Webster. He brought him from somewhere that helping out with Nelly, and he brings in Steve Zabel from Philadelphia, who was an Oklahoma guy who he knew he could trust. But those guys had an awful lot of experience, and then he it was really good for the younger team, or the younger players on the team, so that when it was our turn to shine, we already knew how it was supposed to go and how it was to operate. So
right. No, he did a great job, really.
Yeah.
And when we had the good offensive line, the team ran the ball well. I mean, really well. That was always a hard thing to do in the NFL. And he did a great job across the board.
Well, 78, we set the record that was broken finally in 2019 by Baltimore. 2019 by Baltimore. And so that's what, 40-some years. And
and 2 extra games then, too, wasn't it? Weren't they up there?
No, we were 16. We're 16 and 78.
Oh, you were, yeah.
That was 16 and 78. Well, and then the other thing I remember about you, Randy, is you were that leader in the locker room. You were our union rep. Back then there was some discussion about free agency and all of that was never going to happen for a long, long while. But there were reasons that and in one sense the Patriots did a wildcat strike in 1975, and you were primed for that. And in fact, there was some talk that one day you would probably be president of our union.
Well, there was not a job I wanted.
Not as a player, I'll tell you that.
No, but yeah, we had in the history in '74, the collective bargaining agreement was up, and back then, you remember John Morris, who was another center, preceded Linkaitis, was the player rep, and then they ended up not getting an agreement at all. There was no collective bargaining agreement in '75. And we held a meeting right before the last preseason game against the Jets. And all of the players said, well, what's on the table? And we said, well, here's what's on the table. And they said, well, what's the union looking for? And so I explained to them what we wanted. And they said, well, it's sort of stupid. Right now we got nothing, right? Because we have no agreement. So they said, let's go out and we'll strike just ourselves. And if all the players follow us, then maybe we'll get a good agreement. And if nobody follows us, we should take whatever the last offer was. And so I can remember going up to Chuck Fairbanks' office after practice on Friday night. Friday afternoon, we finished practice, and I went up to Chuck's office and I said, well, Coach, I think I need to talk to you. And he goes, yeah, what? He goes, we got the Jets, this is our last tune-up now. And I said, well, it really isn't. And he said, what do you mean? And Chuck was not a talker, it's just, what do you mean? And I said, well, the teams voted to strike this game and call upon all the other teams in the league to follow suit. I've been on the phone, and 5 other teams, player reps said, oh, look, if you guys go, we're in. So that'll be 6 for sure. And I said, you're sure now? And they said, yeah. Now our players were going no matter what. So the union called me late in the afternoon from the home office and said, the game's tomorrow, and we've heard from all the other player reps, and nobody else is going to do it. No other team is going to strike. So, you got to go and play. I'm calling all the guys on the team. They said, no, we're not playing. We're going to find out one way or the other if this league, if the players have the backbone to do it. And we did not play the Jets game. And in those days, Pete Rozelle called me several times because the commissioner never got involved in collective bargaining. Now it's always the commissioners, the head guy. But Pete said, my job as commissioner is to be neutral. So I'm one, so he kind of tried to coax me in one, just hold, what's going on. And so finally, after the game wasn't played, Monday and Tuesday, I was involved with negotiations, and the owner said, fly into Chicago Wednesday morning. We got to settle this. We'll get a deal done. And and they said, any of your Patriots players that want to go can come. Bring them to Chicago. So I don't know, it was about 6 or 8 of us. We got on a plane. We went there. They had made a pitch that we'll get an agreement within the next 3 months for sure. We're going to concede here, concede there, da 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 da. And the players, based on that, said, okay, we'll go back and play. So we started the season. As things occur, no agreement was ever reached. And it was finally a year later, actually, it would have been 76, right, that the union went ahead and, gave up on the free agency. We did get, I think it was 2 first-round draft choices. If a team gave up 2 first-round draft choices, that would allow a player to go to another team. But short of that, before that, there was never any free agency at all.
Right.
And then I got involved outside. I was out. I played my last year in Green Bay in '77, but I stayed involved with the union at that point as a sort of an advisor. And in 1988, they filed that was the year of the big strike and the replacement plan, all that stuff. And after that, we filed a lawsuit. And at that point in time, I was representing players. And the Freeman McNeil case, which was the case that brought about the salary cap and the settlement and free agency, I was the first witness in Minneapolis in that case. And I was on the stand for 2 full days with Don Mikowski from Green Bay and Dave Richards, offensive lineman from San Diego. So I have a lot of scars from the union negotiations over those way too many years.
Well, again, I thought at some point in time you would be the president of the whole outfit, and everyone would follow your lead. But they were wise to have you as counsel, that's for certain. But so you retired in '77, and you I'm not sure you went immediately, but at some point in time you hooked up with Bob Wolf here in Boston.
Yep. Yeah. If you remember, right out of in '77, Bill Ankaitis and I and another fella in Boston, George Matthews, the arena at Northeastern is named after George.
Right.
We put together a deal to build the first racquetball fitness clubs in New England. And that was the first one was 1977. And then by 1981, we had 10 clubs around New England. And I was approached by a fella that was trying to start the USFL, the United States Football League, which is the one that former President Trump owned a team in, the New Jersey Generals. But he didn't own it the first year, just he came in the second year. But we sold all the clubs, and George and I bought the franchise in the USFL in 1981. Ultimately, we played in '83. It was the Boston Breakers. And George and I were 50-50 owners. And then we couldn't get a stadium anywhere but BU. So we played in BU. We had 12 teams in the league. We had ESPN contract, ABC national contract. Going into the second year, we couldn't find a stadium in Boston, and I went down for a weekend to New Orleans to talk to the Superdome and made a deal to lease the Superdome over the weekend. So I never came back. Debbie and the kids had to move down. And so we played our second year in New Orleans in the Superdome. That's the year that Trump bought the team and his team in New Jersey. And I went to the first league meeting, and Trump got up and gave his, putting politics aside, his plan was to move the league to the fall and take the NFL on. That was never our plan, or we bought in really believing that you could make spring football work. So we sold the team, but I stayed on for the year in '84 to run it as president in New Orleans. And then in '85, because they were going to go to the fall, the owner moved the team to Portland. And then I wasn't going to Portland. I came back to Boston, ultimately hooked up with Bob Wolf, and ended up being CEO and representing players. So was involved with negotiating contracts for Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Tommy Glavine from Billerica, Hall of Famer with Atlanta Braves. We did Larry King's contracts on CNN. New Kids on the Block. What a fun time that was in '89 and '90.
Boston gang.
Yeah, so had the experience of representing players. Then again, got back involved with the union on a number of issues. A lot of sports hats.
Well, and then let's the transition, and you morphed into game plan from that experience, which instead of me trying to describe it, but I always figured that you were one of those kind of deal makers, putting money together, to try to make deals work, and in a bigger scale than just representing players, more on a team or a league scale.
Yep, no, you've got it spot on. When we started the Boston Breakers, we hired an attorney, a gentleman, Robert Caporal, who was an attorney, but was really a sports attorney. He'd represented the Celtics, he represented the Hartford Whalers, all representing teams, had nothing to do with. And we hired him as our team president in Boston. And then he became an equity partner, and we were very close, very good friends. And then finally, when we sold the team, he went back to practicing law. And, I went on with Bob Wolf and all that. Well, one afternoon, 1993, early in 93, he called me up and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you." So I went and we had lunch, and he said, my law practice has become almost primarily financial advice. He said, I don't do any litigation anymore, so all my clients, it's always business advice. And he said, there's nobody that does this full time. There's nobody out there, not Goldman Sachs or Citibank or B of A, none of those people or any of the big investment banks. They don't deal with sports on a full-time basis. And he said, would you be interested in partnering up, and we'll start a company that does that. And so, from my standpoint, I played in the league, obviously, was involved deeply in union negotiations, then owned a team as an owner and been through that, and then represented players and negotiating all of this. And it seemed like a perfect point. And, to be very honest, I'd been doing that with Bob for about 7 years. I said, let's do it. And I went to Bob Wolf, and he said, hey, good luck. I was getting a little tired of, 22-year-old millionaires. And literally, unfortunately, right after we had started Game Plan, I was actually using the offices at Bob Wolf, and Bob passed away. Uh-huh. And so our first assignment was to sell Bob Wolf Associates, which we did to a local group, which included Bobby Orr. Right. When we did that, and we were very fortunate. We were the first ones, and I had a lot of financial training over the years in all of those positions leading up to it. And we ended up representing the Celtics, the current group, Wick Grossbeck and them buying their team. We represented the Golden State Warriors, current ownership, buying the Warriors, Sacramento Kings. We did the LA Dodgers, a bunch of hockey teams, the Ottawa Senators, and the St. Louis Blues 2 or 3 times. We've done about probably at least 30 affiliated minor league baseball teams. And basically, we get hired either to help somebody buy a team or sell a team. And we're a traditional investment bank. So somebody selling a team, we're basically the brokers. We put together the financials, we put together the memorandum, the presentation, we go out and find the buyers, we hold the auctions, we do all of that. And on the buy side, we help negotiate for the client with the price. We do the due diligence, the valuation work, and then in almost all those cases, we raise all the additional capital. So, people don't realize it. Very few teams are owned 100% by one gentleman. That's the exception, not the rule. Right. And so a lot of the teams, an owner might own 40%, 30%, 60% of the team, but the rest of that capital, in the NFL, you have to own 30% or you can't be the controlling owner. In the NBA, it's 15%. But so we raise all the capital that goes around putting the deal together with the team. So it's been a great run. We're in our 27th year.
Well, it doesn't sound like you're ready to let up off that throttle yet either.
My oldest son, Colin, is now president of the company in equity. So we let him do all the work and we take all the credit.
That's a perfect mix, and you're still able to spend enough time with Deb and the family and enjoying all that kind of stuff. And I'll let on a little secret is that you shared that wonderful home that you have out in Huntington Beach with Emily and I a couple of years ago when we went out to visit my daughter Shannon. And what if you had just remodeled the whole place and you let an offensive lineman in there? I'm not sure what you were thinking, but it really is wonderful. So you spend part of your time here in Massachusetts and part of your time out in your home state of California. It must be a nice mix.
It's been great. We technically we're Massachusetts residents. I'm here, over 6 months a year, but we're out in California, 5 months or so a year, usually the winter, and then we split up the spring and summer. But the best part is my oldest son and his younger brother, they're only 16 months apart. Colin has 4 grandkids, 10 and younger. Kyle has 3, 6 and under.
Oh my! And
so when we're out there, and then here in Boston, our daughter, who has 2 little grandkids, as a matter of fact, they just arrived a little while ago. I can hear them. They live right here in our town, so we can visit both of them constantly. So it's been a real blessing.
Well, it sounds when the Vatahas get together, you probably turn into a shepherd more than you do a grandfather at that point.
Yeah, a few years ago, 2 years ago, we took when you add everybody up, we have 15. We took everybody to the Alani it's the Disneyland Resort in Oahu. And I said, you know what? I felt like I ended up buying Disneyland, the property, by the time I got out of there for a week. It's unbelievable.
No kidding. Randy, I'm going to let you go so you can go visit with your wonderful family and all, and make sure you pass my regards to all of them. So.
Oh, I will.
Yeah,
I will.
Please do. I so appreciate you being around, and I've got a little bit of news to share too. As Patriots Alumni is back in business, we, like many companies and a lot of nonprofits, we were in limbo in 2020 with the pandemic. We couldn't do what our missions suggested that we do, and that's hold these camps for kids that we do from New Bedford to Bangor, nor could we raise any of the money that it would require to fund those camps. So we were on a bit of hiatus, but the good news is our foundation grants have resprouted. We've got our sponsors and partners back, and we start our first Camp for Kids in Manchester, New Hampshire on May 22nd. So between May 22nd and sometime towards the end of July, we'll have 23 of those camps back up and operational. We've got our fundraising event, our Stars and Stripers fishing tournament in Falmouth coming up June 12th. The NFL schedule just came out, so we've targeted the game at Houston for our Game with the Greats. It's the away game viewing party. That's October 10th. And we're still waiting to find out when they're going to finally induct Richard Seymour into the Hall of Fame. And then we have an alumni weekend built up around that induction ceremony. We have our other fundraiser, which are sporting clay shoot down at Addyville East Farms in Burrillville, Rhode Island. So we're up and operational.
Sure,
we couldn't be more excited about it. So
that's great. And we were just talking earlier. The CDC today just announced that no more masks needed for anybody, indoors or outdoors. And as long as they're vaccinated. Right. So I put a little push in there for everybody that doesn't have a medical issue that prevents it, to please get vaccinated.
Well, that's a great reminder. And another great reminder is I want everybody to know that this episode of In the Huddle with Randy Vataha was brought to you by Mark Cruz and family. Over the years, Mark has supported Patriots alumni with mentoring and advice, and along with his family has participated in all of our events and programs. So without without partners and sponsors like Mark Cruz and his family, Patriots alumni wouldn't exist. So anyway, thank you, Mark Cruz.
Here, Mark. Yeah.
And thank you, Randy Vataha. I'll see you a week from today when we all gather at one of our quarterly meetings. In fact,
always looking forward to those.
This ought to be a great one. We've got, most of the times we sit around, remind each other how famous we once were, but we've got some things we can accomplish at this meeting. So I'll look forward to seeing you.
Our stories get better every year. I think I now claim I have a game where I caught 38 passes for 7 touchdowns. So.
Well, no one wants to say, I don't remember that, because then you end up having to go through neurological studies for cognitive skills.
Exactly.
Anyway, Randy, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thanks, partner.